Wana Fuse bado tunaendelea, nipo South Africa, nimekuja hapo kwenye Afromed kwa sababu ya kupata mambo ya elimu, na tumekutana na watu wataalamu tofauti, na kuna kitu ambacho nimejifunza na nikataka ni share na nyinyi. So madam, thank you for your time. Kindly introduce yourself, your name and what do you do, then we'll proceed with questions.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here. My name is Sara Branco. I'm a human rights lawyer and Brazilian. Sorry, I lost my thoughts.
Wana Fuse, mambo ni mengi. Nakosa muda wa kutafsiri. Kwa hiyo yeyote ambaye ana nafasi, ambaye anaweza kaitafsiri, anisaidie kutafsiri, ambaye anaweza kaitengenezea subtitle, basi anisaidie kutengeneza subtitle, kwa sababu Fuse ni jamii, tunasaidiana kwenye majukumu.
So I'm a human rights lawyer and an activist for the human rights of people of African descent in Brazil. Last year, I coordinated the C20 Secretariat, and this year, I'm part of the C20 South Africa leadership team as well. Thank you.
Has it happened yet, or
it's happening?
The C20?
Yeah, because it's the entire year. Yeah.
It's the entire year. Okay.
Yes.
Okay. So, for those who don't know what C20 is, and they might heard of G20, they might not know the difference. Can you please explain it to them and its significance?
Thank you for the question. So the G20 is a group of the 20 most important economies in the world. So besides the 19 countries, there is the European Union, which represents 27 states. And just in 2023, the African Union was invited to join the group. So last year, it was the first time that the African Union participated in the G20 agenda. So the G20's main goal is to discuss macroeconomic and social issues around the world, but led by the leaders of these 20 most important economies. So in the structure of the G20's governance, you have the engagement groups. So each engagement groups, they are under the track, which is like the Sherpa track. So the G20 has the finance track and then the Sherpa track. So the finance track is led mostly by the ministries and the heads of the central banks. And then the Sherpa tracks is led by the diplomats and head of states, which is where the negotiations happens. So we have the final declaration written by the leaders by the end of the process. So it's an entire year process. Last year, the G20 was under the presidency of Brazil. It's very important to highlight that it's a rotative presidency. So in December 1st of last year, Brazil did the handover to South Africa. So this year, the G20 is under the presidency of South Africa. The team that the government of South Africa chose is solidarity, equality, and sustainability. So all the debates will be discussed around these priorities. So in the Sherpa track, then going back what I said about the engagement groups, so these groups are the ones who are not like actors in the government, and they are members of the regular civil society. So each one of them are thematic groups. So you have the W20, which will discuss mostly issues related to women, the B20, which is the business 20. So they're going to have like companies discussing all issues around their field of work, think tanks, Oceans 20, which is a very interesting engagement group that became official just last year. So they bring a lot of issues around oceans, so they're very different and interesting discussions. And then we have the C20, which is the engagement group focused on the civil society. So it's a group that has been, that exists since 2013. So it has its relevance politically saying. Last year, it was historical because we had more than 2,000 organizations from all over the world who joined the C20. So it was very, very meaningful. So in the C20, as in the other engagement groups, our work is to discuss and write recommendations. And then we do advocacy work with the Sherpas, which are the diplomats from the countries that are under the G20 leaders. So in the final declaration, our recommendations are also absorbed by the document. So that's very hard because usually like the leaders are most focused on economic and more technical debates, right? So I think like the C20 is the engagement group that's the more democratic, more diverse, and that we push the most to make sure that, I don't know, maybe like one recommendation out of like over 100 that we write is absorbed by the leaders' declaration. Yeah, so this, and then the C20, the structure of its governance is divided by 10 thematic working groups. So each year, the country who is leading the process, they name the organizations that will lead the C20. And then the work is to look back in the previous years, you know, and when we decide the theme of each working groups, it's important to have connections to which was discussed, but also consider the priority of that countries for that year, right? So this year, for example, we have a working group on debt. Last year we didn't have that, but considering that it's in South Africa and the context of the country and the continent as well, we thought it was important to have a working group specifically focused on that, right? And then the activities, they will happen throughout the year. So now we are preparing for the inception meeting, which will happen around April. And then once we have that meeting, that's when the working groups, they start meeting to discuss the recommendations. So it's a very interesting process because it's not just the South African civil society, but we have civil societies from all over the world debating those themes, and then they need to negotiate amongst themselves like which recommendations they are in alliance and in consensus, so that those recommendations will go in the final document. And then by the end of the process, the C20 delivers what we call a policy pack. So that policy pack has all the recommendations produced by all the working groups. And then after July, that's when, after we deliver the policy pack, we start the advocacy work, dialoguing with the Sherpas, so our recommendations are accepted by the final declaration. The leaders, they produce and...
Process, eh?
Yes, it's a very intense advocacy process, and it's very interesting because it's very difficult to advocate under the G20. It's a very bureaucratic process, so there are a lot of rooms that nobody's allowed in besides members of the government. So last year was the first time that the representatives of the engagement groups were allowed to participate in a meeting in the finance track. So that was historical in the G20 agenda because that was never possible. But finally, last year, they understood that it was important. So it's a continuous advocacy work that goes throughout the years, right? And each country, when it's on the presidency, we think about like different pressure, you know, to throw to the leaders and see what we can advance to push the agendas that we think that is important for us.
Do you see any significance before Africa was included and after? And do you think it will bear fruits in the near and short term?
What do you mean by bear fruits?
Like before Africa was included in the G20, they were not part of the discussions. They could not push the agendas. They had no voice there. Whatever G20 decided is what was to be implemented. Now that Africa is represented, do they have a significance in the policies? And are they catered also to include inclusivity for Africa as well?
So that question is very interesting. So South Africa has always been part of the G20, right? Because it's the most powerful economy that we have in the continent. And then with African Union, I think it takes the G20 to another level regarding the representation of the continent. And one thing that the South African presidency announced is that because it's the only country who is in the G20 and also is the first time that the continent receives an important agenda in this magnitude, they will make sure that it's not only like South Africa's matter, but the entire continent. So they will rotate the important meetings in different countries in the continent. So that's for sure, in my view, it makes it more inclusive, you know, especially issues around debt, which I think is very, very important. and also on climate change, because we know that Africa is the continent that suffers the most with climate change and is the least heard, right? So I do think that it's relevant, so it's very, very important that the society in general, like from different countries in the continent, engage in the process and pay attention to it, especially because we don't know what's coming ahead of us. Once next year, the G20 will be led by the US. So considering the current US administration, anything can happen. So it's the last time that the G20 is in the global south. So I think that makes it even more powerful for us to bring important issues to the agenda.
Did the US attend this year's G20?
So they were last year. They should be participating, their Sherpas, which is the diplomats, should be participating on the meetings. But Trump has mentioned that he might not, host the G20 next year, And then if he does, we don't know what will be the issue, since they left the Paris Agreement, this war on tax and things like that. So there are a lot of issues around it. Exactly. And for us as civil society, we are also concerned because we are very progressive in our recommendations. So, and then when a country that is denying to talk about diversity and inclusion, race, LGBTQ plus rights and all of that, so what does that mean to the policy pack? Right, so which will be the actors of civil society that will be in the C20?
Considering it's the largest economy in the world.
Exactly, so they have a huge impact on that. So I think it's going to be interesting to see, but at the same time we need to pay attention because anything can happen, Yeah.
Thank you very much. There are a lot of things that I never knew. There was the Ocean 20, there was the other 20s that you mentioned. I never knew actually, this is the first time I only knew about G20. I never knew there was C20, and now you've just opened me up to other 20s which you've mentioned before. Thank you very much. I really appreciate, and I'd like to also welcome you whenever you're free to come and visit us in Tanzania.
Definitely, I would love to do that. It would be a pleasure. No. So, yeah.
It's beautiful.
Oh, I'm sure it is. It's I just started flying, visiting Africa last year.
Okay.
So, I have been just with Ethiopia and here in South Africa. So I'm definitely looking forward, to being in other agendas in other countries. So I'll definitely come to Tanzania.
Tanzania is very beautiful. Actually, we have some destinations that Tanzania has been chosen as the #1 tourist destination in some areas, wildlife and other attractions. So you're most welcome, and thank you very much for your time.
Thank you for having me.
Wanafuse, tunaendelea kukufikishieni elimu tukitokea South Africa, Afromedi. Asanteni sana.
Ila Mwanafuse, ili upate content zote za Fuse kiwepesi: Fuse Military, Fuse X-Files, Fuse Adventure, Fuse Tech, Fuse Ndinga, Fuse Afya na zinginezo, kuzipata kwa wepesi jiunge kwenye Fuse WhatsApp channel. WhatsApp channel ni tofauti na WhatsApp group. Hii ni WhatsApp channel. Utapata direct link ya video zote pala zinapotoka. Moja ya njia ambayo unaweza kujiunga ni kuscan hii hapa QR code, au tuma ujumbe wa WhatsApp kwenye namba hii hapa, utapata link ya kujiunga kwenye WhatsApp channel. Ila pia nitakuwa naweka link kwenye comment section.
It's your techie DJ Smart 255 hapa SNS. Unaweza follow on my Instagram DJ Smart 255, YouTube channel DJ SMA 255, Threads DJ Smart 255, Snapchat DJ Smart 255, TikTok DJ Smart 255. Account name yapo, lakini vile vile unaweza ukatoa simu yako ukascan hiyo ikakupeleka moja kwa moja huko. Ninakuwa na posti vitu ambavyo ni fun, clip kwa ufupi ambazo mada ambazo unazitoa, mambo yangu ya mapishi na pochopocho za hapa na pale. TikTok DJ Smart 255.
DJ Smart. Easy.